All right, so let's go live. So the first thing, I just opened them in the order in which they were submitted, I guess. So Levi, I think that's the one that you marked, right?
Yes. So are you going to project here, or should I just start talking?
Oh, I keep forgetting this. Yeah, and as soon as I find the window here, Jesus Christ, Teams. I think it's this one.
Something happened.
Hey, good times. Yep. So I can start whenever you're ready.
Yep, I am waiting.
Excellent. So this is a request from the Orleans team. They marshal exception objects back and forth to represent failures in their, I believe they call them grains, communication mechanism. The general, one of the things that we said a while back was that when we brought exception types from .NET Full Framework into .NET Core, we tried to make all of those types serializable. This one was missed because it didn't, in .NET Framework, implement the proper serialization constructors. So it just never got migrated to the .NET Core like I can be serialized list. One of the things that we said more recently was for exception types that exist both in Full Framework and in .NET Core, we would still allow them to be marked as serializable, even though we're not allowing other exchange types to be binary format or serializable. If I misunderstood our conversation from a few weeks ago on that point, please correct me. So this request basically is, hey, allow this exception type to be serializable in .NET Core, just like it is in Full Framework. There is a caveat here, which is the serialization mechanism that this uses in .NET Full Framework uses something called Safe Serialization Manager, which was really meant to allow serialization to take place in partial trust environments. That infrastructure does not exist in any capacity in .NET Core, which means that we can't use that infrastructure. We have to use the typical serialization infrastructure. The consequence of this is that the payload for this type, once it's serialized, is incompatible between .NET Core and .NET Full Framework. That is, if you serialize it in Core, it cannot be deserialized in Full Framework, and vice versa. I spoke with the Orleans team. They believe that that behavior is okay.
So now I'm confused. So everything you said until this point makes sense to me, except when you say, because I mean, I assume that Orleans, similar to many other customers, they do a partial migration, right? They don't do everything at once. And so presumably when they have some grains running in .NET Framework, some grains running in Core, and they have failures across those, they want to still have a sensible behavior where you can, catch exceptions and propagate them as normally. So what does this feature add for them if you can't cross-serialize at that point?
They want to be able to utilize their existing infrastructure to be able to be able to marshal exceptions, but I told them that this would only work if both grains are Core or both grains are Full Framework, and again, they told me that that was acceptable from their point of view.
Okay, so then I guess it would still work if the execution, with the unit of execution they have is consistently on Core, consistently on Full Framework. So then, let's say that's okay then. But then my next question would be, if we believe that that is the right behavior for the stuff that runs on Core, why would the serializable guideline only apply to exceptions that exist on Full Framework?
The guideline was to allow code that ran. The guideline is to allow you to write code that is net standard compliant, I believe. Jeremy, please chime in if I'm mistaken here. But the idea is if you follow the "this is how exceptions should be serialized" guidance, then you'll create something that is valid both on Core and on Full Framework for things like app domain remoting or marshalling. But because app domain marshalling and remoting don't exist on Core, what we were saying is that exception types that exist only on core don't need to be marked as serializable, because there was never any hope of those things ever being used in code that crossed app domain boundaries in the first place.
Sure, but like I guess there's the mechanism you can have is still like if you're on core, for example, right, and you're doing what Orleans does, and exceptions cross boundaries. Presumably they do their own catch exception, binary format exception, and then somehow translate that payload on the other side, and then do the deserialization there, right? So they don't use remoting, but they use effectively their own version of remoting, right? So I guess my question is, if we say yes to this, how can we not say yes to the next exception that Orleans on core happens to throw that never existed on full framework?
You're right. It is absolutely a slippery slope. One of the things that I linked to in this issue is like we need an answer for how do I just send, how do I serialize exceptions safely without using binary formatter? That infrastructure doesn't quite exist yet, because what we tell people is if you want to do this safely, exception.toString and send the string across a wire. That's the only truly safe way to do it.
So I guess then your proposal is exceptions are somehow serializable on core, and it might be as simple as calling toString on it. But if the exception happens to exist also in full framework, then the way by which we do that is binary formatter, because that's the only two thing that exists in both places.
Yes, that was the guidance that we came up with a few weeks ago, because we, in the obsolescence document that I had sent around, we had said that we're not going to mark any other types as serializable from here on out going forward, but we carved an exception, into that rule, which said that exceptions are special because there is a way of generating exception-derived types, and the way of generating them involves using the proper serialization semantics.
But then basically what you're saying is that what Orleans does today on core, we will not support moving forward.
What do you mean by that?
Well, presumably Orleans on core today does use binary formatter to serialize the exception and to actually get, the same instance out of the other side, right? And you're basically
Correct.
saying the only safe way to do this is toString, but then you basically lose the the actual exception object, if you will, right? You get a different exception object with a different type, where maybe that is the property of something, right? But like you no longer get the actual types, and so
right,
you
which is why we need to consider a way to preserve all of the vital info as well.
Right, but like no matter what that is, it's basically different from what Orleans does today. So like you're basically saying what Orleans does today, they do that because they still have to support both sides, but eventually you would expect Orleans to either accept the fact that not all exceptions will be binary formatable, or that they have to move to something else.
Right. So as we stop generating packages that target net standard, as we generate packages that target like net 5.0 and above only, those packages will not have serializable exceptions, which means that yes, their framework will need a different mechanism of shuttling this information back and forth. This is not future-proof for them, correct?
That makes sense to me. So then basically this would be something we would do for 6, and then in, I don't know, whatever binary formatter plan for 7 or 8 was again, but like eventually we will phase that out.
Yes, because right now they're also running into an issue where ASP.NET forbids binary formatter by default now in .NET 5. We're going to roll that out to other project types in the future, and they're already going to be in a situation where they're now asking their customers, please configure your application to opt into this thing that the runtime team is telling you not to use. So we're going to have a come to Jesus moment anyway.
So what serialization do we believe in tomorrow, basically? Who is saving us? All right, so then does anybody object to approving this then? I mean, everybody else was suspiciously silent.
I mean, it seems fine. We do need to understand what the guidance will be going forward, and like I'm personally fine with saying all exceptions get marked as serializable, because that's what we've been saying for a while. But it does become If they want it for any other type, then that's a much harder discussion to have, just like it always has been. But yeah. So really, we need to figure out what the guidance is going forward, because this has already shown that there are things depending on the serializable attribute that aren't just binary formatter, and that we need to figure out either how to get them off of that or to have a different policy than the one that was proposed.
Yeah, and like there's an existing issue right now with memory stream and what is it, data contract serializer, that we're kind of pushing back on, because we really, really, really don't want people to send private field information across that boundary. But if you look in the linked issue here, the Orleans team actually has been pretty good about saying, like, look, if we do have a new technology that's meant only for serializing exceptions and absolutely nothing else, just that, here are the characteristics that we would like that thing to have. So I think those talks are productive right now.
All right, then let me just mark this as approved.
Is there anything that we need to do in order to say, like, look, these payloads are not compatible across runtimes?
I mean, we have said in the past that we generally don't support cross-framework serialization. We have gone out of our way to make it work in scenarios that have unblocked people that we care to unblock, but it's not something that we generally say we support, right? I mean, it's something where we try not to break it when we had support for it in the past, but we're also not necessarily going out of our way to make that possible, I guess.
Okay, if that's our default stance, then perfect.
I mean, the other thing I would say is it's hard, right? I mean, it's hard to do it version to version, like doing it across frameworks when one is moving fast and one is moving slow is it's a losing battle anyway.
Yeah, and it's not that we're doing it just for the hell of it. It's that the infrastructure that we need to write on top of simply does not exist in core.
Yeah.
Nor is there any interest in bringing it back.
Yeah, so I guess that's the point, right? So if it's just, somebody in .NET Core felt like they reordered some field or readability, then I would say, yeah, let's undo that. That's not adding value, right? But if it's you have to bring back a whole bunch of infrastructure to do that, then that's very sad. But I'm also surprised that we basically cannot preserve binary wire format with this technology. It seems like a bad idea in V1 as well.
You can't preserve field order with reference types anyways, because the JIT automatically reorders them.
Yeah, I don't know what it was just one example, right? Where, let's probably not the order, but let's say rename a private field or something, right? That's...
Yeah.
I mean... My point was just that for internal implementation cleanliness, we should not break binary serialization, I guess was the point.
Right. But the technical reason here is if we wanted to make it compatible, we would have to serialize the type object now, and that brings a whole can of worms with it, which we do not want to open.
Yeah, I mean, so long Orleans is fine with that, and they still think that this adds value, I'm okay with that. I was just confused because the way you explained it to me made only sense when cross-framework serialization works. But if they're okay with that not being there, then seems fine.
Yep.
All right, then next one. Jeremy, the other Jeremy, you're up.
Yeah, so this is the API that we have in WinForms that we brought up before that actually mutates a string. I've depreciated the flag for it, but it's still that allows the string to be mutated. But we still need it for support. So these are the proposed APIs to allow people to actually specify that they want any possibly mutated string out of it. And they're basically just taking...
When you say when you mutate string, you actually mean system.string is mutated?
Yes. Sorry, you weren't in that one.
No, that sucks.
Yeah, it's pretty much. So
it's a glorious design.
What?
It's a glorious design.
Oh, it is. But so I added span overloads, and that's where I actually ran into this when I was actually doing some performance work and all that. I'm like, really? Yeah, we mutate the string, and the span ones don't let you do it. They throw if you have the flag, and what that mutation thing does is, like, if you happen to have one of the other flags that will truncate the text, there's puts the three ellipses on, right, or the ellipses, the three dots, and there's an option to get back whatever the framework, Windows actually put out, or the common control did. So to make this relatively easy for people to do and migrate to, they just basically tacking on the output string on the end of the existing APIs. And if you scroll over there, that's what you have at the end of those APIs. Is just they've just got, for the ones that were, I didn't add I added the one that took all the arguments, and that's the only one I did, and then added ones that had out strings, and then an output text buffer that people can use or pass in. And the string is always going to be the same size or lower, so that's something that we can check with the span case, and it's fairly straightforward to implement. And by having the span on the end of it, it also allows people to, if they care to use the same buffer on the input and the output for those that really want the advanced scenario, which the native Windows API supports, right?
So what is the
But
behavior?
not through string. What's that?
Sorry, what's the behavior of the overloads that take a span when the output buffer isn't large enough? It throws.
We throw. And it's an easy thing to do because you have to pass a span in that's as big as the input.
I see, because the text is guaranteed to only get shorter.
Correct. This is a truncation thing. It'll either be the same size or shorter.
And they make sure that, because I think they add the ellipsis suffix, right? So that presumably they do the math to make sure that they don't accidentally make it longer.
Yeah, and they use the same buffer, right? So this API takes a buffer and a length, right? And that's just one, the Windows API. So,
I see. So like Windows API literally just writes into the buffer you give, and that's why we also mutate the string, because they literally just put a /0 somewhere in there.
So in these particular cases, basically what we would do is we'd be looking for that. We would be setting that flag implicitly, because ideally we'd get rid of the flag.
Right.
Completely. And these ones will say, well, we'll set that flag, which only matters in a couple cases, right? So there's the two cases where it actually does the ellipses thing, is where the only case it cares about those things. Mm-hmm. So we would go down the special fork there, where we would make an intermediate buffer and either two-string it, either using the buffer you passed in or creating a temporary one that we would then two-string, right?
So is this something where we should consider doing an analyzer for that kind of tries to figure out, you call it draw text API that doesn't take span, and you pass in the flags that would mutate the string?
Potentially. I'd also be interested if there are any other places we have lingering around that are mutating strings inadvertently.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I don't know. But when you said it, that it mutates the string, I think everybody was a bit like, what the fuck? So I'm pretty sure that would be very surprising.
This is like a super rare case and the only one.
But presumably that's also why we can't remove we could also just mark the flag itself as obsolete.
Yeah.
But that, I guess the ones so I think you said earlier that when you call the span overloads, they don't allow you to pass in that flag?
They'll throw if you pass in that flag.
Because the idea is that we do it on our side?
Oh, we don't. You're passing it a read. We don't mutate the span ones. And we want to do the same thing to the other ones, right? We'll no longer mutate the string. But we need something to replace it with. So you can't use the span stuff if you want to right now, because we don't have a solution for you if you want the output string. I figured it was better to do that and then bring this thing in as a secondary, a follow-up rather.
So I guess I'm
Rather
confused.
than-
So which ones throw? The ones that output the span or the one that accept the span?
The existing span ones that we already approved that don't have an output buffer.
Yeah, because you don't want to mutate the read-only span that is given to you,
Yeah.
right?
But I didn't make the string ones throw because people are relying on this, right?
Right, because they already exist
I just
since.
needed these particular APIs, so then I can, hopefully what I can do is just in 6 I can remove the flag and throw if it comes in with that flag, because we just do a cast of these things, right? The inputs,
Right.
they're actually defined to the same things that Windows uses.
And then presumably the one where you accept the span and you also output a span, you still reject the flag because the idea is that you call the API effectively twice, or how do you?
Well, we're going to reject the flag just because it's no longer there, and we don't want to confuse people. Have them, use the actual define directly, thinking that that's necessary. Because the casting, whatever it is, if it's, I don't know what the value is. Let's say it's 16 or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we care about that. I mean, so I guess then, okay, we could just basically blindly obsolete the flag and say, if you really want the output string, call the APIs that give it to you, but you still don't have to pass in the flag, because by calling the out methods, you're opting in.
We'll do that magic for you, because it's only, like I said, it only makes any difference in the one case where there's the 2 flags that do the truncation, and that's not really that common. So, but we'll put it on where it's necessary, where there could be a mutation, and in the other cases we'll just pass back out the string we got in and the span that we got in, right? That's just an internal optimization.
And I think we asked this last time, but do you know of cases where people actually rely on the behavior where the string is being mutated, or could we just get away with obsoleting the flag and not adding these APIs?
This was opened by a customer because we depreciated the string copy. That's where it came to our attention.
Oh, so you relied on
They're like, we do this all the time. We do a string copy so we can get the output from this thing.
I see. Okay, then never mind then.
Right. So from the guidelines perspective, what we say is something like the output parameter or the output buffer should be the first parameter after the input buffer, meaning that instead of going at the end where they're proposed, the guidelines would suggest they go after text. So you would get draw text, device context, read-only span of char text, comma, span of char destination. It also says prefer the name destination for a single output buffer.
Okay.
I mean, we can say that it doesn't fit in context here, especially because there's this iDevice context that goes before the text, and so this is already not quite looking like buffer patterns, but just thought I would say what it is that we wrote down of where we think that output spans go in signatures in general.
I think that guidance makes sense for canonical overloads, where it's literally just, source, comma, destination, and then the usual output or whatever. But like in this case, we already pass in 6 arguments. I would not fuck with those. I would literally just edit at the end.
No, but I mean, that's what the guidance says to do. It says insert it before all the rest of the method parameters. That's what we wrote down.
Well, yeah, I think I remember when we had this meeting, did we ever really think about methods like this where you take 6 arguments and the API already exists?
Yeah.
Because that seems problematic.
The reference example we had was RSA signed data, which was byte array data, hash algorithm name for the hash algorithm, and signature padding. We made it be read-only span data, span of byte destination, hash algorithm name, RSA signature padding, and outend bytes written. So we said destination is the output buffer is the first parameter after the input buffer, and that the input buffer should be the first parameter.
I'm fine anyway. I just this one seemed to be the smallest. I started here because it seemed to be the smallest amount of change to their existing code, is just tack this on the end, But
yeah,
but either way, I don't care. Whatever everybody.
I mean, I have to say, to me, this kind of reminds me of the general contention that we have between consistency across patterns, across APIs with a singular pattern, and just being consistent in a particular context where you already are, whether it's a type or a method group, right? In this case, it seems inserting them right after that seems more noise and churn that actually makes things less usable than more usable. It seems easier to understand that you have an out string, and then you say, oh, you don't want the string, you actually want the output. Like they appear next to each other in IntelliSense, right? As soon as you put them like at the very top.
Well, I guess one of the things
Seems
I don't
weird,
understand is why is it void with an out string? Because you already have you would be varying on the return.
Yeah.
Based
Yes.
on the existing one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, like, yeah, I can completely believe that we needed to add the out so that it wasn't an in-place modification, and that once we're adding the out, that it makes more sense to put the destination there. I'm pointing out what we say the starting position is.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. But
Yeah,
I think, like, to me, like
obviously I would not design these APIs this way the way they were to begin with. They're kind of cumbersome, but you know.
Yeah, that I think goes without saying.
But yeah, our expectation is that it's input buffer, comma, output buffer, comma, rest of parameters to the method,
And then comma size.
comma, the outs. So,
yeah.
Okay.
and then comma, the optionals. But
Thank God we don't have optionals here. That would make things a lot easier.
right. So, but that's the general expectation that we have for buffer writing operations. But I agree that it looks sort of natural here at the end. I just had the bell ringing in the back of my head that said this isn't canonical, and so I looked up the written guidance.
Seems reasonable. Anything else? I mean, like, I just messed with the text in my buffer to just align the parameters a little bit more, and it looks consistent to me.
The we have a prefer, I think, is how we wrote the guidance, that a single output buffer should be named destination. Again, that's a prefer. If we think that output text buffer makes more sense here, then we can.
We could call it output text destination.
Or, yeah, I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I think either one works for me. To me, the important thing is that they both have the same prefix, because it makes it clear, like, what what you're getting from them.
Right. I mean, the thing that is confusing all of this is the fact that we're having to introduce an out string because of changing a thing that was doing modify in place to returning, and that we can't add a return type. So we are effectively in uncharted territory here. So this may be what's proposed may be the most reasonable given what it's trying to change about the API shape.
So one other question I have is, I mean, why do some of the APIs not take an iDevice context? Which one are they taking then?
Why do some of them not take it? Because they don't have any. They don't care, right? When you don't specify the one, then you're actually utilizing basically the default device context, the screen.
I see. So that's already existing behavior then?
Yeah. It's like you can just say, well, measure this thing, and we'll say, all right, well, it's going to be whatever your primary screen is, right?
And I assume that's not the same as passing in null for the DC.
Well, on the Windows standpoint, when you're going to get a device context, yes, that's how you get the screen DCs. You pass in null for the HWin that you're getting the DC from.
I see.
But that's just an internal thing.
But they're non-nullable, right? Or are they nullable?
What's that?
Is the device context nullable here, or is it non-nullable?
It's iDevice context, right?
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is there logically a question mark after them or not?
Our current behaviors that we throw with a null device context when the ones that take one.
I see. Then that behavior, then the overloads make sense to me.
Yeah, we would be changing the semantics that the existing stuff has.
Dun, 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 dun. So anybody any concerns then? Otherwise I would just approve it.
And hopefully I won't find any more of these.
Yeah, I mean, given the shape that exists right with it that we're trying to modify, this, yeah, like I said, seems the best we're gonna get.
Jeremy, Kay, can you remind us the old methods still work, correct? Or is the flag, does it throw an exception now?
It doesn't throw an exception now because that would have prevented people from porting. So
would we consider changing it in .NET 6 to throw an exception?
Yes, that's my plan.
Okay.
And I plan to actually remove the flag if I can, so to rub it in even further.
Okay.
And then check, because I need to check, because again, like we just cast this. We actually have a couple extra flags on here, but then we cast it to the underlying flags that go to are defined to most of the flags in there.
If you want to remove it in 6, then how do you suggest you mark it obsolete now if you can?
Oh, it's already obsolete in 5, yeah.
Oh, the flag already marked obsolete?
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's fine. But generally, I would say like we should shoot for one release of a heads up before we move an API. That would be the ideal.
So does that fit that guidance then? Because 5 has it as obsoleted, and then 6 it'll be done, and we'll actually have this thing to replace it. So it's like,
I mean, it's still better than we did with menu, so I take it. I mean, I think it's fair to say you start with telling people not to use it, and then you basically, apply more, thumb screws. I mean, in binary format, we said we start with making it throw, right, or making it, you have a compat flag that you have to turn on or something like that, right? And that would be the same here. You could say maybe the first step is you don't remove the API, you just throw, and then the next thing is you actually remove it. But honestly, at this point, I would say if you think throwing is okay, removing the enum member also makes sense to me. I think in binary formatter, if you really needed it, then removing the API would be way more intrusive than just making a throw and enabling a compat flag, right? In this case, if you really wanted a compat flag, you could say, yep, now you have to cast the underlying value to the text enums because we removed the member, right? So the workaround is, ugly enough, but also trivial enough that it probably wouldn't block anybody. So I think I'm fine with obsoleting and removing in 6. Seems like a...
Well, we obsoleted in 5, we'll remove in 6, and throw in 6 if you try to use it.
Yeah. I mean,
by casting to that thing explicitly.
The ugly methods there or the methods that don't follow the rest of the pattern for buffer writing will then no longer seem to fit if it's removing the ones that are commented out right now. Then, but
oh no, they'll still be there.
That'll be evolution, I guess.
The commented out ones will stay.
Yeah. So the thing is, we don't remove the APIs. We just remove
the output, which hopefully is rare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just removing the defined enum value.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then throwing if we try to pass it in the other one to push. Because we have to filter it out anyway. I don't want to do it silently.
Right. What is the obsolete message you have right now?
It's the obsolete is on that flag. It's
basically, does it say we are going to remove the enum member in 6?
No, it just says the normal obsolescence text, that this may be removed in a future version.
Yeah, maybe we should consider being stronger there and actually tell people like we will remove it, so stop using this. And then the other thing we should consider is, given that you add the APIs now, at least add a hyperlink to it, so that you can actually point people to, like, if you rely on this behavior, please call these new APIs. You can put that guidance somewhere.
Yeah, well, I was not planning on doing these APIs in 5.
Oh, never mind. Yeah, sorry. But then I guess that makes it a little bit more ugly when you obsolete. If you remove the API at the same time as you introduce the replacements, that makes it a bit harder for people to migrate, right? Because you basically ask them to do all at once, but then in 6 they just get a compile time error and nothing, or not even that. You just get runtime. I guess you get a compile time error because members are no longer there, but you don't get any sort of, okay, what should I do instead kind of experience, right? Now you have to actually Google that. Versus if it's an obsolete message, then
I can do 7 basically to remove it. Update it when I say like, all right, well, here's the replacement API. That makes sense.
Yeah. I guess that would be my bar in general. Like when you obsolete something, you should have the replacement in before you remove the API. Otherwise,
replacement in for a version.
Yeah, because otherwise you can't tool it, right? People have to now Google it.
Yep, makes sense.
All right. But other than that, I think we're fine then. Anything else? We have 50 minutes. Otherwise, we'll call it early. Are there any questions in chat? I don't think there was anything in chat.
It just means we warmed Steve back up with an easy session.
Yeah, that's nice.
All right, then I'll just wait for the freaking window to actually render. Yep, there are literally no questions on YouTube either. Okay, fine. So then let's call it a day. And then I see you guys next week, I guess.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.